Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Millennial Revolt, an independent political talk show that seeks to bring a different narrative than the stale one we have going on right now in the mainstream media. So today we are going to be talking about NATO's military buildup on Russia's border. And I think what's important that we talk about this is because it's getting little to no attention in the mainstream media. And when you have a huge military alliance like this building up on a country's border, it raises the question of what is it intended to do? It doesn't seem as if it's for defensive posturing. It seems like it's for offensive posturing. So there's so much to get into, so let's just jump right into it. Hundreds of American tanks, trucks, and other military equipment have arrived at the German port of Bremerhaven to be transferred to Eastern Europe as part of NATO's military buildup near Russia's borders. The U.S. plans to deliver a total of 87 Abrams M1A1 tanks, 20 Paladin artillery vehicles, and 136 Bradley fighting vehicles to Eastern Europe. 4,000 American troops will reportedly be spread across Poland, the Baltic states, Bulgaria, and Romania, while they remain on a rotating basis. Polish and U.S. troops are scheduled to hold a joint massing drill in Poland later this month, which NATO says is aimed at reassuring its European allies in the face of what it calls an aggressive Russian behavior. The 10th Combat Aviation Brigade, with 50 Black Hawk helicopters, 10 CH-47 Chinook helicopters, 1,800 personnel, as well as a separate aviation battalion with 400 troops and 24 Apache helicopters, are also scheduled for deployment in Eastern Europe. The best way to maintain peace is through preparation, U.S. Major General Timothy McGuire explained, adding that the deployment is about just showing the strength and cohesion of the alliance and the U.S. commitment to maintain peace on the continent. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania will host troops from Germany, Canada, and the UK, with each nation sending up to 1,000 servicemen. So you have Germany, which is going to be sending 1,000 troops. Canada is going to be sending 1,000 troops. The UK is also going to be sending 1,000 troops. On top of that, you have the US, which is going to be sending 4,000 troops. You have 7,000 troops from different countries amassing on their border, and this wouldn't be seen as something that would be worrying to the Russian people, would be especially worrying to the Russian government. You have a huge military alliance claiming that this one country is being so bombastic in their actions and the things that they are doing that they're threatening the whole of Eastern Europe. So Western Europe is going to start amassing on their border just as a deterrent measure. And keep in mind, all of this is happening while our legacy media is so engulfed in the alleged allegations of supposed Russian hacking into the US election. So no one is paying attention to this. No one knows this is going on, because this is a cause of concern for the American people as well as the Russian people and people in Europe, because God forbid if a conflict breaks out, you have a world war situation happening. And unfortunately, too many people do not pay attention to what our militaries do around the world and the actions that they're taking, especially in Eastern Europe. This is very dangerous. NATO calls its military buildup near Russia's borders a defensive measure, claiming it is justified after Moscow's reunion with Crimea in 2014 and its alleged involvement in the Ukrainian crisis. Now keep in mind, the US government was involved in the overthrow of former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych and the installation of Poroshenko. Now, Russia views the military bloc's actions aggressively and says that the massive military is undermining the security balance of the European continent. In 2016, the Pentagon shipped more than 1,200 containers of ammunition from Army and Air Force units in Europe, according to military.com, making the largest single shipment of U.S. ammunition in more than 2 decades, the website reported. Moscow has responded by stationing its most modern weaponry and armament on western borders, including the enclave region of Kaliningrad, and staging large-scale military drills on its own territory. U.S. Secretary of Defense nominee James Mattis told a Senate committee in confirmation hearings that NATO must build capacity in Eastern Europe to deter Russia's alleged aggression. This came a day after Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson testified that the United States would defend NATO member states if Russia invaded. Again, there is no proof that Russia wants to invade. There is no proof that Russia wants to expand its territory and create the former Soviet Union. There is little to no evidence that Russia is being aggressive towards the NATO countries. Caldet, co-winner of the 1985 Nobel Peace Prize, said that is a lie that the United States insists on maintaining. Caldet pointed out, however, that it was the United States and NATO, not Russia, that was building up its armed forces to unprecedented levels in Central and Eastern Europe and exacerbating tensions in the region. The severely provocative buildup of military forces, ABM, which is anti-ballistic missile systems and equipment on the Russian border, is at the least unnecessary and the most could lead to nuclear war with Russia, Caldet warned. Far from threatening nuclear war, the Russian government and the media were warning their people about the dangers of the NATO military buildup, Caldet claimed. He said, indeed, the Russian press and leading politicians in the Duma are now saying that this could well be a future reality, and they are encouraging the Russian population to practice drills to shelter themselves from nuclear war. The American public and U.S. policymakers also need to take the threat of nuclear war and the nightmarish consequences that will follow far more seriously, Caldet explained. She said, in the event of any thermonuclear conflict breaking out between Russia and the United States and NATO, we are all doomed to die a dreadful death of vaporization, severe burns, acute radiation sickness, or freezing and starving to death in a nuclear winter that will ensue. And she is right. There is no winning in a nuclear war, and I don't think anyone in our Congress seems to understand that. They are so engulfed in their Russophobia, and not saying that Russia is perfect and the Russian government does do a lot of things I disagree with, but the fact of the matter is, amassing on their border, taking this offensive measures to saying, well, we're going to deter through strength, nobody wins from that. Russia isn't Iraq. Russia isn't Libya. Russia isn't Syria. Russia is the second strongest country in the world with as much nuclear weapons as we have. And I continue to say this on my channel because I need to stress this point to people that nobody wins in this situation. The U.S. is carrying out the transfer of its armored equipment as part of an agreement between Washington and its NATO allies, which was signed back in April of 2016, that was intended to provide Eastern European countries with security. At the same time, the U.S. and NATO plan to conduct a large-scale military exercise in Poland. Washington and NATO agreed to deploy the American military equipment and troops and create all necessary infrastructure in July of 2016, about 5 months before the presidential election in the U.S. Now, I think it's important to give you guys a little bit of context as to why Russia and NATO have a problem. NATO needs an enemy to justify its continued existence. Now, NATO was meant to counter the Soviet Union, who had the Warsaw Pact. Since the Soviet Union's collapse, people have been rightly questioning the fact is, why does NATO continue to exist? Now, just to give you guys a little bit of context, 25 years ago when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was an agreement ratified again in 1996 that the United States would not take advantage of the end of the Soviet Union by expanding NATO into Eastern and Central European states that have been Russia's principal allies. And in fact, NATO has done just that, and they have been pushing relentlessly to take every single former Soviet state that was in the Warsaw Pact and collect them into NATO. German politicians have also raised concern about thousands of NATO troops and equipment, along with hundreds of tanks that have been sent to Poland and countries bordering Russia in what has been touted by Washington as a defense against Russian aggression. SPD party member Dmitry Voltrix said, "It does not help us if tanks will be going up and down on both sides of the border. I hope everyone will remain calm." He said, "I believe that despite all the difficulties, we should seek dialogue with Russia," warning that relations with Moscow could worsen. Germany's ruling CDU party, which is Angela Merkel's party, called Voltrix's standpoint strange, with parliamentary faction leader Ingo Salzberg saying the operation takes place within the framework of the contractual agreements of NATO and at the explicit request of Poland. NATO's buildup in Eastern Europe has also come under fire from Germany's Die Linke party, saying that tanks did not create peace anywhere. Christian Riorberg stressed in a statement. Tobias Polberg of Die Linke slammed the stationing of the U.S. tanks and military equipment in Poland, saying this will trigger an arms race and lead to an escalation in relations with Russia. Crowds of people marched through Bremerhaven to protest the deployment and transport of NATO troops and weapons throughout the city. Hundreds of American tanks, trucks, and other military equipment bound for Poland, said to be the largest arms shipment since the fall of the Soviet Union, arrived at a German port to be transferred to Eastern Europe. The protesters marched throughout the city, holding signs and banners reading "No NATO deployments" in the militaristic march against Russia and out of NATO. Dmitry Peskov, a Kremlin spokesman, said in a statement that this operation threatens our interests and our national security. This is even more pronounced when a third party, the U.S., reinforces its military presence on our doorstep in Europe. Kremlin has hit out at the biggest deployment of U.S. troops in Europe since the end of the Cold War, branding the arrival of troops and tanks in Poland as a threat to national security. The Kremlin said that it will hold back on retaliatory actions in the hope that a Donald Trump presidency will herald a rapprochement with Washington. The UK is also contributing to the buildup of NATO forces in Eastern Europe. The UK formally took command of NATO's response force, making up 3,000 UK troops plus others from NATO who will be on a permanent standby ready to deploy within days. The contributing countries include the US, Denmark, Spain, Norway, and Poland, as well as Canada. As a civilian, I am extremely concerned about what our military in NATO is doing in Eastern Europe. I am more of an isolationist. I do not want to see our military involved in conflicts. And do I think the Russian government should be concerned? Yes, but do I think they are concerned? No, because they have just recently deployed nuclear-capable missiles in Kaliningrad, and for anyone to start a war, NATO will have to cross the Russian border. NATO has already tried some false flag scenarios, which have failed, and they need to manufacture consent. The U.S. media wants to get its citizens up in arms about Russia so we can do something about it. That's why they keep coming out with phony allegations of Russia supposedly influencing the election. Now, they have tried so much to get Russia to cross their border. Think back to the downing of the Russian warplanes in Syria, to the killing of the Russian professionals in the Deir Zor raids, to the bombing of the camp hospital in Aleppo, to the killing of the Russian ambassador in Turkey, to the expulsion of 35 diplomats in one fell swoop by President Obama, with no justification publicly offered, to the seizing of Russian-owned diplomatic compounds in their country, to the deliberate lies that Russia hacked into our election while at the same time saying that no vote counting machines was compromised. How do you influence the winner in an electoral contest if you can't influence the votes and the final figures that are awarded to the different contestants? It doesn't make sense. And if you think back, the U.S. has been trying to invade Russia since 1991. They first tricked Yeltsin into allowing the U.S. Atlantis and neocons into forming Russia's government, and then installed their boys into office of influence. Then along came Vladimir Putin, who spoiled everything for them, hence the anti-Putin movement and demonization. Putin is in a class of his own, and Yeltsin handed over his power to Putin, and he stated, "Take care of Russia," which Putin has done. All of these false flags have been happening to get Russia to attack, but it hasn't worked. Now, We also have false flags such as the Olympic doping scandal, Russian bombing of civilians, the hacking, MH17, Crimea, and the supposed Russian aggression is designed to give them an excuse to start a conflict. I say this all the time. The American government plays checkers while Vladimir Putin plays chess. So I will definitely keep you guys updated on this story. I think it's important that we find out what's going on. We know about what NATO is doing, because if we have a huge military alliance amassing on one country's border, it's only a matter of time before an accident happens, and it can lead to a global situation that no one is prepared for the consequences. I'm the Millennial Revolt. Thank you guys so much for watching, and you have a wonderful day. Bye.